Hey, Jeff, thanks so much for making time for us today. Really excited to have you.
Great. Thanks, David. I'm excited to be here.
All right, so let's start with what you're up to right now. Tell me
Okay.
about JK Squared and what you do for a living.
Sure. So I started JK Squared about 8 years ago. And the idea was, how do I take the marketing expertise that I have built up over my 30 odd years in the business and apply that to solving marketing challenges for businesses that typically can't afford a full-time chief marketing officer? So I come in on a fractional basis. I build marketing plans, I develop strategies, I manage internal teams. Most of my clients have somewhere between 15 and 30 employees, and really just don't generate the kind of revenue that requires a full-time chief marketing officer, but I find they really need that skill set. I work with a lot of visionaries. I work with a lot of sort of marketing driven CEOs that just can't take on that responsibility as their companies are growing. And typically, I'm working with 4 or 5 companies at any one time. I'll take on some special projects. My clients are all over the country, but I've developed a nice base of business in South Florida, which in the wintertime is a wonderful place to visit. In the summertime, I have a couple of clients in Detroit that are much better to visit than the ones in Florida. So it's a great way to sort of combine my passion for marketing. I get to travel a little bit and really sort of help people solve problems, which is really what I get the most self-gratification out of. I just really love doing that.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what do you enjoy most? Is the
Yeah.
solving problems or the marketing campaigns or?
It's the problem solving. I mean, people hire me to do marketing. One of the things that I find the most interesting is as I get to know their business and with my own experience in running businesses, I'm able to really become a sounding board, become a trusted member of a leadership team, and really contribute to helping others achieve their dreams. I do a lot of work with companies that practice EOS, which is the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And one of the things I love about EOS is they really define a visionary and an integrator. And for the longest time in my career, I thought of myself as the visionary because I like being in charge. I like determining where things are going. What I've learned is I'm really much more effective as the integrator. I'm the one that really understands the dreams that someone wants to make happen and how do we get there. And so it's really given me nice context, and that's what I love to do, is really sort of help visionaries like yourself get to where they want to go.
That's very cool. So I'll take you back to high school.
Okay.
You just got your learner's permit and you said, you know what, one day, I'm going to work with entrepreneurs and small,
Yeah.
mid-sized businesses and be a fractional. How did this start?
No,
What were
no.
you thinking back in high school?
When I was in high school, I wanted to be the next Bob Costas. I had this dream that I was going to be a sports journalist. I was the editor of the school paper. I was the editor of the yearbook. I set my sights on the best journalism schools in the country. And that's where I thought my career was going to take me in the world of sports. I had opportunities in high school to do things like interview Doug Williams on the way to the Super Bowl back in '87. I interviewed Dr. J for an article. I really got to do these things and immerse myself in the world that I thought I was going to want to be in. So I get into Northwestern, Medill School of Journalism, one of 100 people selected from around the country as the best and the brightest in the future of reporting, and spent 3 months in Denver, Colorado, working at the Boulder Daily Camera. Great little newspaper, the home of Rick Riley, originally, who went on to work for Sports Illustrated and still writes for many publications. And I was there at a great time. The Broncos had just hired a new head coach. The Rockies were celebrating their inaugural season. Nothing like watching a baseball game in a sold out 80,000 seat football stadium. I got to interview the Pirates and the Phillies, I think, were in town. And this was when the Phillies won the World Series. This was the great Pirates teams with Barry Bonds and Bobby Bonilla. It was really a great sports experience. The Nuggets were in the playoffs. The Avalanche were in the playoffs, everything I could possibly want. And I realized I didn't like it. I didn't like the hours. Working as a sports reporter means that your work is done at nights and evenings and weekends. And that's when, as a young 20-something, I wanted to hang out with my friends. I learned that I didn't like the intrusion of the media. You're sort of reaching people at some of their most difficult moments, some of their most private moments. I remember one of the things that happened when I was doing my internship. I was assigned to cover local reaction to a difficult news story.
Mhm.
And some of the people hadn't heard the news and they were like physically taken back. And I had to deal with that emotional reaction. I felt like I was intruding on their private moments. And the world of sports, once it's a job, it's a job. And I'll come back to that later in my career path. But I learned I didn't think I wanted to be a sports reporter. So now what do? It's my junior year of college. I'm headed home for the summer, and my father, I'd taken one advertising class. And my father was in the printing business and said, I know some people at some ad agencies in Baltimore. Do you want me to open up some doors for you? And one of the things that I learned is when somebody says, do you want to open up some doors? Always say, yes, I do. I interviewed at a couple of different agencies, met with one guy, Steve Mays at an agency called Trahan, Burden and Charles in Baltimore, and changed my life. Good interview. Nothing was really there. This was probably June of 2020. I'm sorry, June of 1993. And Steve calls me up. I hadn't heard from him for a couple of days. And he says, how soon can you be in our office in Baltimore with a car big enough to hold 100 footballs? And I was painting my old bedroom in my house, taking down the old wallpaper from when I was a kid and was putting on a fresh coat of paint. And I looked around the room and I said, I'll be there in 45 minutes. And I dropped everything, threw on a tie, threw on a shirt, showed up at the office. He gave me his cell phone, which at the time was probably about that big, his credit card, his American Express credit card, and a list of sporting goods stores around the Baltimore area, and said, we need 100 official NFL footballs, and I need them by 7:00 tonight. It was probably about 3 p.m. by the time I got there.
Right.
And this was an era before Amazon. They had actually contracted with Wilson. They were getting footballs for a promotion that they were going to need the following day, and the footballs didn't arrive. And so the only way to do this was to go visit sporting goods stores. And there were 2 here, 3 there. I remember there was a Modell's I found that had 20 of them, and I thought I'd hit the mother load. And what we did with these footballs, I drove around the Beltway. I get back to their office at about 9:15. I've got the 107 footballs. And I said, so do I have the internship? And he says, I don't know, come in tomorrow. You're going to help us get them signed, and then we'll decide. And I spent the next day handing footballs to Colts legends, Art Donovan, Johnny Unitas, Lenny Moore, and Jim Taylor, getting them to autograph all of these footballs.
Wow.
Because the promotion that they had come up with was the idea, they were selling suites for a proposed Baltimore NFL football stadium. And this was when Baltimore was trying to get an expansion team. And they had developed this package where the footballs were all going to go into boxes, and people who committed to buying a suite at the new stadium would get one of these footballs as a thank you gift. Turned out that campaign was one of the most successful campaigns in the globe that year from an ROI perspective.
Wow.
We generated, we spent probably $500 a box. Every box was generating a suite worth, $150,000, $200,000 in revenue a year for a 5-year commitment. The ROI was something like 1,000 to 1, and we won the Diamond Echo Award from the Direct to Marketing Association.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, wow, I can take what I like about sports. I can be around sports, but now I'm going to marketing. And that's what I did. And I worked as an intern at TBC. That turned into my first job opportunity. And that got me into advertising and marketing. That gentleman, Steve Mays, who gave me that first opportunity, ended up being a key figure in the rest of my life. He ended up moving out to Seattle when I was tired of being in Baltimore and said, I'm looking for places to go. I called him up, and he was hiring for a position in the Seattle office of Gray Direct, where he was working at the time. I moved across the country to Seattle. His wife was working at another agency in town. They had a softball team. We didn't. They were looking for people to play on the softball team. That's where I met my wife. playing softball with them. When it was time for me to move back to the East Coast, I relied on that same network and found a job back on the East Coast. So it's funny how the people that some of the most formative bosses that I had very early in my career really ended up sort of connecting the dots and playing that role. And what I learned was I loved advertising. I loved marketing. I loved understanding consumer behavior.
Wow.
I really love drilling down into what makes things, what makes people say yes, what makes people say no, how do you deliver a message? And then, I learned a lot along the way about process and what makes things function and how do businesses operate. As you know, I am an opinionated individual. I like to have ideas. I like to come up with things. And I've always sort of thought to myself, well, maybe I could be the boss. When I came back to the East Coast, I started my first agency, Habit Advertising, because I wanted to be the boss. And I did that for about 5 years. And then I started a sports marketing agency because I said, well, maybe I can combine my love for sports again with marketing. Did that for about 5 years and was reminded of all the things I love about working in sports and all the things I didn't. And then started consulting. And it was really sort of a combination of all these things that got me to where I am today.
Right. Now, that's a fascinating story. 2 questions. First is a flippant one, like 107 balls versus 100. So what happened to the extra 7? But you don't have to answer that question.
I think I have one here in my office.
I'm guessing. Yeah. Hey, the real question was, I also know a little bit about you and that you are quantitative.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about where that came along?
Yeah. So I happened to stumble into a direct marketing agency as my first opportunity. And back in the early 90s, there was a real differentiation between branding and direct marketing. The branding guys did TV commercials. They wined and dined clients. They went to exotic location shoots. They did print ads that looked fantastic. But the science and the analytics side of marketing was starting to become a thing where advertisers were saying, well, look, that ad looks great. I'm glad we won an award, but how do I quantitatively measure the impact it had on my business? And I was trained by someone who grew up in the world of direct mail marketing, where those 6-page letters that you get in the mail with all the different flyers attached, and you could measure the response. It was always attached to a toll-free number that you would call because at the time there was no internet, or you could send back a response card, and you could measure the impact of these campaigns. And I was at the dawn of this era where branding and direct marketing were starting to come together. So we did things like direct response television. The idea of doing a television commercial with a phone number at the bottom, believe it or not, was revolutionary in the early 90s. And the traditional advertising world really fought against it. The creative directors didn't want anything muddying up their ideas. It wasn't about direct sales. It was about creating awareness and creating interest and creating an emotion. Right. And what I was able to do was to understand, how do you bring those things together? And so I took that brand response philosophy with me throughout my career. So when the internet became a thing and people could actually buy online, and now I can track that back to campaigns. And then you get systems like a Salesforce or a Pardot or a MailChimp, where you can actually see what's happening when you do tactics. What I have found is that it's not really just about getting someone to raise their hand and say yes. It's not about winning awards. It's really about understanding how these things fit together. When I lived in Seattle, we did work for the Microsoft Network, MSN. We're competing against America Online. We were sending out CDs to everybody. And we built, at the time, what was one of the largest market budget models I'd ever seen. It was 12 11 by 17 pages printed out and taped together that hung on the wall, where we tracked every single marketing campaign that we ran over the course of about 3 years. And we're able to predict for our clients, hey, when do we really need to drive demand? We don't really care what the cost of acquiring a new customer is. Great. We'll pump up the television. We'll use these mail packages and go from there. If they said, hey, we've got to dial back budget this month, we have to be efficient. What do we use? Oh, okay. Cancel the television. Let's go with this print ad and we'll send out these CDs. It really sort of changed the model. And those are things that I took with me, because at the end of the day, I'm not in advertising to win awards. I'm not in advertising to make fun commercials. I'm in advertising because it needs to drive revenue for the companies we work with. And that's something that I've always kept with me from there.
Oh, that's cool. So tell me a little bit about what's the future for you, Jeff? More of the same, do something totally different. what drives
Yeah.
you to move forward?
I'm glad you asked. So I've been what I learned throughout my career is about every 3 or 4 years, I get bored and look for new opportunities. I think the longest I ever had a job before I started my first business was 3 years. Both of my agencies that I ran, I had for 5 years. I've been consulting now for 8 years. And I think the only reason I've been able to do that so long is that my clients rotate every 2.5, 3 years. But as I look towards the future, I've also learned that from a marketing standpoint, not that I've done everything I wanted to set out to do, but I really enjoy different challenges. I really enjoy the challenges of operating businesses and, like I said earlier, helping things get done. And so as I think about the fractional journey that I'm on now as a chief marketing officer, I'd love to try to get into fractional chief operating officer opportunities. I mentioned EOS. A lot of clients have fractional integrators. The integrator's job is to make sure that all the departments are doing what they're supposed to be doing to live the vision that's set forth by the visionary and the founder. Being a fractional integrator would be really interesting to me. Being an EOS implementer would be really interesting. I'm going to the EOS National Convention this April with the idea of learning more about EOS and what it takes to be an implementer. I've worked with several of them who have all encouraged me to take that journey. So it really gets back to, like, again, understanding what your passion is, learning that my passion is helping others, and going, okay, what can I do that's going to help others in a world that I understand and can control? And I think sort of taking that marketing to that next level and really sort of looking at the entire business functionality, I think that's the next phase of my career. When I get there, it is a little bit of a mystery. I still got some time, but I think that's what lays ahead for me.
That's awesome. Jeff, thank you so much. It's I've known you for a couple of years now, but I always enjoy getting these insights and seeing how you got to where you are, and you specifically, and knowing that 107 footballs made a huge difference in your life. And had you said no, right, what would have happened? So
Right. No, I think about that all the time. The road, I know the path taken, the path not taken is not necessarily one I want to visit, but it is amazing how just these little things become the big opportunities that define the rest of your life.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, Jeff, thank you so much. If people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way?
So you can email me. It's jeff@jk-squared.com. You can also visit jk-squared.com online. You can connect with me. I'm on LinkedIn and a variety of other social platforms. And I'm always happy to have a conversation really with anybody about marketing, about business, about any of the things that I talked about. I always find ways even now to dabble in the world of sports. So anytime, anywhere.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jeff.
You got it. Thank you, David.